The growing calls across the nation to defund the police.
To end policing as we know it.
Off the charts violence in New York City. 11 people shot in just 8 hours on
This is
Sunday.
about the police officers who every single day put on that uniform and they run towards danger when we run away from it.
Hey, you can
every fucking time.
Hey, I'm on, baby.
You're on. What's my line? What's guns up, giddy up?
I just making sure I was working.
You know, it's like
I tried unmuting him, but
it's premature. No, we're not premature anything. I don't know what it is. What kind of dysfunction do we have here?
I don't know. Today we were in the studio at 9 to be ready by 11.
Well, your guest wasn't there at 9 though.
No, guest just walked in. We got the guest on.
Threw a wrench in everything.
And then threw a wrench in everything. Jimmy, is there any way you could jump up and zoom me out? Because only my eyeballs are showing. Oh,
you
really?
look great. Yeah.
Oh, I just had to scroll down on the. Yep. Here we
Guns
are.
up, giddy up.
What did you say? Your eyeballs?
Why do we even have a catchphrase if we fuck it up every week?
Every week.
Every week. Welcome to the show, guys. Failure to Stop podcast. Can't stop, won't stop. We are the #1 show in the minds and hearts of America when it comes to law enforcement meets culture. There's no one better. There's no one doing what we do. So, suck it.
They might have better intros, but that's it.
Yeah, Sticks, if you're listening, I know you're not. We're better than you. Do you hear me? Joe Rogan, we're coming for you, buddy. We're coming for you. This is it. This is the podcast to beat all podcasts. Andy Frisella, Real AF? No, it's Mike and Eric.
I just want to put this out there for the record. I'm not coming for Joe Rogan or any dude. I know the jokes are going to start to fly there. I'm going to go ahead and get ahead of this.
On today's show, guys, we've got a banger, as they say in the industry. We've got a big one here. That's what she said. We are going to break down this synagogue hostage situation that unfolded last weekend. We have 3 guests that are going to join us because, let's face it, Eric and I are mostly idiots, and we're not going to be able to cover this effectively. So we had to bring in the big guns, the experts, the people that know what's up when it comes to protecting our spaces, our places of worship, and what's really going on in the big picture of things as far as domestic terrorism. Is this terrorism? Is it not? How should the media cover this stuff? Are they misleading us? Are they helping us? There's a lot to break down in this situation, in this case, and so we are excited to do that for you. But none of it would be possible without our flagship sponsor,
GhostBed. GhostBed has been a loyal sponsor of the Drinking Bros for the last coming up on 6 years. Everyone raves about them. Super comfortable mattresses that last forever, and they're made in the good old USA.
Okay, USA.
Every mattress has a 20-year warranty. Some even have 25. You can try it out for 101 nights. If you don't like it, you can send them back. No hard feelings. One of our favorite parts about GhostBed is that each mattress has that cooling technology in it. So if you're stuck in this very hot blizzard snowstorm that we canceled school for here in North Carolina, it's actually a snowstorm that does not exist. You can stay cool while staying hard on one of those cooling technology type ghost beds. Mike, I think you have one, right?
Oh, yes.
You like it?
I absolutely love it.
Well, you seem like you've been in a lot better mood lately, and I'm guessing that's just because you are getting a good night's sleep.
I'm hitting that deep REM, baby. I don't know if they list that as a feature, but deep REM. I go so deep into the REM.
Yeah.
It's like another world, bro.
Yeah.
When you hit
Going
that
hard
deep
on the
rim in the right spot, oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
That's where it's at. It's where you want to be every night, right in the rim.
It feels so good.
GhostBed offers bundles, so you can get everything you need right now. You don't even have to really think about it. Just choose from their 4 mattresses and then pick your bundle. So whether you just need a mattress or a frame or you want it all, I want it all. I want it all.
And I want it
No. Rest in peace, Meatloaf. Like their cooling pillows and
Yeah, man,
sheets,
74
you can
years
get
old. The big guy died. Sorry to tell you.
And he didn't
Sorry
write
you guys
that
had
song.
to hear it this way.
Yeah, he didn't write that song either, but
He would have lived another few days if he had a ghost bed.
that's fact, actually. Get the best bang for your buck. Right now, GhostBed is offering 40% off of GhostBed bundles where you get the mattress and adjustable base with 30% off everything. If you use that promo code Drinkin' Bros, that's DRINKIN Bros, ghostbed.com/Drinkin' Bros, $35 a month, 0 down, 0 financing, and that's if you have firefighter credit. Go to ghostbed.com/Drinkin' Bros and get you a mattress today.
Saved me like, I want to say like $1,700, man.
Hell yeah.
The savings. It was beautiful.
I love savings. I love savings.
Thank you guys for listening to the show, being there. We're kind of getting back into the swing, into the new year. We're happy to be here. We're happy you're here listening, pleasuring your ear holes. To the Wolfpack, we say thank you. If you have visited failuretostop.com and ever supported us, if you've supported our sponsors, especially if you have gone and left a rating and a review. We know that is so painstakingly difficult to take 2 minutes out of your day to leave a review and help the show grow. We have a few that we'd like to acknowledge, people that have been dropping some reviews into the old Apple Podcasts, the king of podcast review locations. So if you got that, please drop them. What do we have here, underpaid producer? Oh, there we go. Love the show. Denny K2585 says, 5 stars. My nutsack tingles with excitement and anticipation every Friday when you guys drop a new podcast.
Well,
that may
you
actually
might want
be
to
a
go to a
medical
doctor.
condition. Yeah.
Might want to see a doctor on that.
Could be unrelated to the show. I don't know.
Yeah.
YOEMTS says, just stop and listen, 5 stars. These two are a riot to listen to. They have fabulous mix of comedic relief and serious topics. I'm trying to get my husband, a cop, to listen to this podcast. Don't quit. So he won't listen to us. Don't quit what you are doing. You make topics relatable and understandable. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I hope your husband turns out to be a man and listens to the show. Be a man.
It's really funny because I went and stayed in a hotel in Wrightsville Beach with the family. We took a little mini vacation this week.
Yeah.
Spontaneous
Spontaneous
vacation.
That's right.
And I'm sitting in the hotel. I do like a little on my private Instagram. I kind of do one of the storyboards where I'm, posting the little
It's just called a story.
beachside. Yeah, the little beachside hotel that we got for the night, which was lovely. And then I get a picture like 30 minutes later from the inside of somebody's car, a picture of the hotel I'm staying in. And it just says, come outside. And this is on Instagram. And my wife is like, I tell my wife and she's like, I'm not good with this. And I was like, fuck me either. So I grab my pistol. I tuck it in my back of my.
You went outside, didn't you?
And I go outside.
Why'd you go outside? It's like a horror movie. You don't
is.
keep going.
The
Don't go
funny
down
thing
the
is
hallway.
there was no
Don't go,
people
you just run
on the door
away.
either. And there was a cop sitting out there in his cop
It's
car.
your fault. It was your fault. If that would have been a bad guy and you would have got shot in the face, I would have told your wife that it was your fault, and I wouldn't even have gone to your funeral. Y'all would have been ashamed of you because that would have been your fault.
I had my gun in my hand. I'd have got to work.
No, you don't go into stupid situations.
Well, it was a police officer.
Well,
at Wrightsville
as
PD.
it turns
big
out.
fan of the show, and his wife is also a police officer, and they're big fans of the show. We got a nice little selfie together. It was really cool, slightly creepy, but really cool. He also gave me some really good food advice and restaurants.
He asked me to sit on his lap in the car. Definitely got a little weird, but we do what we do for the Wolfpack.
Took me home to his wife, and they used their batons on me. It was really nice.
Yeah, I don't know what a cuckold is, but I was invited. I don't know what that means, but
he's like, I love you guys' show so much. Come and bang my wife while I watch in the carpet. I was like, that escalated really fast.
And this is why we're on the Tetherball Network with the Drinkin' Bros, because we're disgusting human beings at times. Okay. What's the other? We had one more review, I think. Lardicus is king. Great show, 5 stars. I always look forward to hearing this show. I get so excited that it makes my heart heavy and my prostate weak. Don't you want those in reverse? Don't you want your heart to feel good and light and your prostate strong? My bladder is full to bursting. I keep up the good work, gentlemen. There's a lot of medical conditions going on in the
maybe there
Wolfpack,
should be
I
a
feel.
disclaimer for our show now, because that seems like a lot of
may cause
I don't-
prostate problems.
This isn't the first time we've had reviews that have medical
We gotta
conditions.
make a promo piece.
Yeah,
May
we do.
cause prostate problems.
Well, all the problems. Like somebody else said that like Lori Lightfoot makes us soft, but then you guys make May hard like an elephant. I don't know. There's been a few
I
of
feel
those.
like we have quite the homosexual underground fan base here.
For those of you who are asking about our sponsors and CardoMax, we do think CardoMax will be back. It is the first quarter for sales. Everybody goes hard, especially in that third and fourth quarter of sales for the year. So we're always going to have a lot more advertisers in the third and fourth quarter of sales for the year, and then a lot of people back off and don't do anything for the January, the first quarter of
It's
sales.
all about the budgets, folks.
So it's all about budgets. Everybody's saving their money. And so, a second quarter, we'll have a lot more sponsors. And right now we actually had potential to have like 3 different sponsors on for today. But because Mike and I are so strict on who we went all in, then they sent us the product. We weren't super happy about the product. We had to call everybody back and say, we're out. We're not going to do this just because we're not into the product. So we're not the easiest people to sell ads.
We're trying to look out for you guys. We want to maintain your trust. Okay.
Yep.
All right, man, we're running behind.
Let's go.
You went on vacation. We talked about prostate and bladder problems in the reviews. I am on doing the 75 hard program. I don't know if you guys know what that is. Look it up if you want to know details. I'm doing it. So while we're live, I will be sucking down water. I will make the underpaid producer get me another coffee, and I have a super smoothie packed with all sorts of good stuff that you'll see me digest on the show while we break down the synagogue hostage situation. So
Okay.
that's what's going on in my life.
You're coming for Joe Rogan. You're doing 75 hard. There's a lot going on in your life right now, man.
I got big goals.
Something. He posted on his personal Facebook. He goes, anybody want to join me in 75 hard? And that was it. Everybody's like, what is this?
People
Isn't
are
there,
like,
isn't there something in the
mean,
Muslim faith about 75 hard?
once
75
you die,
virgins.
Once you
75
die.
virgins.
No, it's 72.
Are we ready to bring? Can we introduce?
Yeah,
him
let's.
or no? We'll do it in a
let's-
minute. I
Let's
just want to make
introduce
sure our
our
producers are
guests.
good.
Let's bring on for our first 2 guests that we're going to introduce you to are Butch and Mike from Guardian Response, and I will let them tell you a little bit about themselves.
Holy shit! Is this the no hair club? What's going on here?
Yeah, we're living the stereotype of 3 out of 4 cops are bald white men. That's a statistic, and so Mike and Butch are also former cops. I'll let them tell a little bit about themselves. Mike is this. He looks basically like me, only with a much better beard that actually fills in. Doesn't have to stay trimmed. He can grow his out. And Butch is actually the life story of Shot Caller, where the guy goes to prison and takes over the white supremacist gang. That's Butch's real story. I mean, clearly, if you've met him in prison, only one of you is going to be the bitch, and it ain't him. I'll tell you that. He is not going to be the little spoon in any situation. So I'll let these guys tell a little bit about who they are and what they're doing in the worship protection space. So have the floor, guys, here, and then we'll introduce our third guest.
Yeah, man. We work SWAT together, but usually with our company, when I introduce myself, I just say I'm his accountant or something because I look like a dork next to him. So
The accountant was a badass in the movie.
That's true. Yeah, so we worked together, SWAT buddies and cops, street cops, and the whole nine. And we started a consulting training company, helping out churches primarily, as we were seeing in Texas and everywhere else, see these increased incidents of active shooter events there and so forth. So we started working with churches and getting them spun up, just because there's a increased kind of time lag between when cops can get there and when these things pop off. So that's kind of our shtick there.
Seems like these situations end better in Texas than elsewhere.
Yeah, we kind of invite them here. I don't know. It's okay.
And Butch, you were a SWAT dude, and like you were a stereotypical SWAT dude, man. You were tactical. You're tactical about your meals, man. I've seen the shit you eat on shift. Like, you have a whole gear dedicated to just what you ate while you worked.
That's it, man. You got to be tactical. That's just all there is to it, right? So
Yes, sir.
big dog. I worked with Mikey and man, we did some SWAT stuff and just police world and all that good stuff, and transmit into the private industry a little bit, try to help some churches and share some of our tactics and techniques with the modern day guy, man.
Love it. And you guys are still in contact. Obviously, we're going to talk about that today with some people that are still in that operator world that responded to this incident and kind of give us some insight into that. Is Hamody ready to roll or what? We ready to bring him in?
We also have another special guest today. We have Hamody Jassim, the terrorist whisperer. If you guys aren't familiar with the terrorist whisperer, read the book. Go watch the Amazon documentary on Amazon Prime. It's titled The Terrorist Whisperer. You've probably seen him on Fox News a few times. But he was America's first Iraqi American spy. He was arrested by Saddam Hussein at a very early age, became the youngest, got freed from that, joined American forces at the age of 17, I guess, somewhere around there, if I remember the documentary and the book correctly. And then he became the youngest command sergeant major of all of Iraq, blown up a couple of times, may or may not have been shot a few times. And he was gained sanctuary here in the United States somewhere around his mid-20s because he was one of the most wanted Arabics out there. And the reason we got him on is because obviously the hostage situation in the Jewish synagogue in Texas was by maybe an Islamic terrorist. I guess we'll find out more, but the terrorist whisperer Hamody definitely has some insight on that. So thank you, Hamody, for being with us today.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. It's an honor being here with you guys.
Yeah.
What is that accent? Is that New Jersey?
I guess that's Baghdad.
Baghdad.
Sunshine
That's the west
State.
side of Baghdad. I would know that anywhere. Who here? Maybe Eric. I don't know if you got something in front of you. I can pull it up if I need to, but what happened, right? Like what are the basics of what happened last weekend, as far as who got held hostage, by whom, and sort of like the timeline. Does anybody have that you want to kind of have that, Eric?
It started in Colleyville, Texas, and your suspect is going to be Malik Hakrab. Am I saying that right?
Yeah,
Hamody?
Probably not.
Malik Akram. Akram is the last name. Yep.
And essentially he went into he got here through the United States 2 weeks ago, ending in part of December, made it into the United States through was it Manchester?
Yeah, he came to this country on a tourist visa that he applied for, and
About a month ago. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, later part of December, got here, bought a pistol. It's unknown where he got that pistol from. Made his way down to Texas. I guess at this point, as far as I know, Hamody's probably got a little bit more insight on this than I do. Unknown why he chose Texas, but he went down to Texas and chose really the most random of Jewish synagogues. One really hard to find. It's not in any major city. It's in a more of a quiet town, off of the beaten path, not even on any major roads. He stayed at a couple of homeless shelters for about 3 nights, all religious, owned and ran homeless shelters. Went to the mosque twice. Got kicked out of the mosque the first night because he tried to sleep there. They wouldn't allow him to. He came back the second day to pray. And then shortly after that, he went over to the synagogue. Actually hung out at the synagogue for quite some time, got to meet a couple of people. They said that he was in good spirits. He wasn't acting crazy, wasn't acting abnormal. Actually got to meet what do you call a pastor at a Jewish church?
A rabbi?
A rabbi. Met the rabbi, talked to him briefly. They got on with the sermon, and then at some point in the sermon, he got up and took everybody hostage. It was live streamed on Facebook. The whole incident lasted 11 hours, ending in Hakrab's death at the end. All the hostages were okay, but there's a bigger picture
ended
here.
Up taking a chair, right, and pitching it at the right time, and then they bolted for the door and got out. And then
so there's a lot more to this story than just the hostage thing. There's the politics that are involved in it. There's the tactics that are involved in it. There's the FBI's involvement in it. Whether or not this was a terrorist event or not was on debate for a while. I think it's now been summed up by the president that it is a debate. So we got a lot of things to break down, but in a nutshell, that's kind of what happened.
Sweet. So Mike and Butch, from your perspective, because you're knee deep in this protective world, of worship spaces. Why do you think it is, and I hope this is a decent question to start the conversation with, is why do you think it is that we see churches, there's schools and there's churches, right? Like, but leaving the schools aside, why are churches such seemingly a common target for someone that would want to do violence, right? Whether it's terrorist related or not. Why do you think places of worship are a common target?
Yeah, man. So to me, what we've seen, I think, the bad guys they're smart enough, right? So they're looking for soft targets. Often they mistake niceness for weakness in our churches. And a lot of times that can be true. And so that's what we've been trying to do, is kind of get around that. You can still be kind. You can still live your religious beliefs while still without suspending all suspicion and skepticism. And so I think they are targeted in large degree because of that. And then also on that side, I mean, if it's ideological, it attracts typically your religious beliefs. They rub with whatever ideologies are out there that don't believe what you believe. And so those wanting to make a statement and what have you are going to choose you because they don't believe what you believe. So that's a couple thoughts.
Anything to add to that, Butch?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think inherently, too, a lot of these guys that do these attacks, obviously there's a huge mental health issue, right? These guys are screwed up, pretty whacked, and obviously they're, if it is in a religious affiliation, that's an ingrained, very deep-rooted sense of righteousness, whatever. We stand up for things. Don't argue about politics and religion and these kind of things. We understand that, our beliefs are our core, and we're going to fight and die for those kind of things. We're going to make statements based on those kind of things. It sparks a fire within us. And then, like Mike said, church people are kind. They're opening, they're willing, they're invitational. A lot of times they use God as an excuse to be timid or meek. We don't have to be weak men to defend ourselves. It's not unbiblical. That's not unreligious, whatever term you want to call it. So, you get these crazy dudes that have some radical beliefs, or they're just mental health issues, depending on what kind of an attack it is, and they attack churches and schools.
So I think it's funny that we bring up mental health in this, and I'm not trying to be argumentative here, but while I've dove into this case, I hear nothing but mental health.
His
And
family is saying that, right? Over in the UK, they're saying he has mental problems.
Right. But, when you have a white kid shoot up a Charleston church, all we heard was, he had a rebel flag in his room. He's a right-wing racist. He's a right-wing terrorist. And if you do any research on radicalism, and you're trying to look at terrorism by the numbers, if you just Google terrorism by the numbers, even though the mass majority of terrorism is conducted by the Islamic State or Islamic extremists, all of the articles are going to quickly jump to right-wing terrorism and how it's growing in the United States, even though we've only had 63 deaths by right-wing terrorists. And then they label right-wing terrorists in such a way that, and I'll read it to you here shortly. But the point being is that we'll give every excuse if it's from an Islamic person, such as mental health or anything like that. But we're not going to talk about ideology, and we're not going to talk about like fundamental hate that is being pushed by certain ideologies. I don't believe that it's mental illness. I believe that maybe you could blame it on propaganda. But I think in this instance, the thing that we should be talking about is more of what are the ideologies behind this and not the mental health aspect of it.
You don't think that this could be like he's got mental problems, and so the context that he comes from may have some ideological bent, but he's just mental, like he is unstable mentally. Maybe he's off his meds, or maybe he's got, a true like bipolar schizophrenic disorder, and he just goes off the rails. Do you think that that's not a possibility here?
I think it is a possibility, but I think that where we have come, especially with the way the media treats things, is that if it's a white person or a right-wing radical, we're going to put mental health way down on the chopping block, and we're going to bring ideological extremism to the forefront. and we're going to show the rebel flags, and we're going to show all of the crazy pictures that depict right-wing terrorism, whereas we have an Islamic terrorist attack, and we have put mental illness far in front of his ideologies, why he chose that particular synagogue, where I believe that we're all asking the wrong questions here, and we're focused on mental health. And we all know that mental health is an issue in the United States, but I don't think we could just blanket everything with, especially when it's trying to fit a particular narrative.
Well, we got to find the truth, right? We can't just decide.
And Hamody, feel free to chime in. I know that you are a Muslim, you are an active Muslim, and I don't want to offend you or anything, but that's just as a lame white dude that doesn't know anything.
There are so many facts that goes into whether this was a radical Islamic attack that's been planned by a radical Islamic organization, or is just an individual act of someone who has a mental health. As myself, someone who has lived among terrorists, worked undercover around terrorists for 5 years of my life, I have never met a mentally healthy terrorist myself.
That's a great point.
It is, and it really is. And like like when you say a terrorist and radical Islamist, usually it is people that are mentally disturbed, and there's exactly why they reach a certain level. But when it comes to Akram and his attack, I know previously you guys were asking the other police officers why Texas, why specifically that area. The reason why, because he believed that doctor point of attack. The second reason that why would they go to a Jewish synagogue, because most radical Islamic believe that Jews are behind all the problems in the world. So they would choose most likely, number one, a Jewish religious place over a Christian religious place. So there's a lot of facts that goes into how this started, why is it started. But when you come back, you always, whether the FBI has considered this, I mean, it surprised me, it shocks me that our intelligence agencies is trying not to take this seriously. It shows me a lot of things in my book that the people dealing with terrorism now are not the same people that I dealt with, who are the generation after 9/11, who went above and beyond the call of duty to get information, to interrogate, to distinguish radical Islamic organizations and know who they are. And now we are dealing with a whole new generation in the intelligence community. That's extremely disappointing, because if you don't need to think about it, whether this was an Islamic radical Islamic attack or not. It is a radical Islamic attack, and there's facts and there's information that I'm going to bring up that's going to make sense to whoever listening to this. Akram was in the UK. He was granted a visa to enter the United States. Akram has criminal records, which I don't know how our government was able to grant a visa for someone who has attacked someone with a baseball bat, who had harassment charges, who had all kind of charges on his records. And the one thing that the British intelligence or the British government idiotically have stated, that he is just a mentally unstable person, and he is not a threat to society. The one part they missed is that he has been placing radical signs all over his place where he lives. This guy has been radicalized. And when you think about the UK got one of the most extremist population of Wahhabis. Mm-hmm. Wahhabis are where Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State fighters believe. This is the ideology they come from. This is what they believe. And the UK is the biggest nest for individuals like that, because they don't go hard on them as they should be. So that's why they got more freedom. They got more room to radicalize people. And he has been inspired by the Wahhabi community over there. And this is exactly how many ISIS fighters joined the fight recently in Syria and Iraq, from the same region, from the same area. So why is the FBI not considering this a radical Islamist, when the same exact people from his hometown went to Syria and Iraq and committed active terrorism, and they were considered radicals and terrorists? But when this guy attacked the United States on his own, I mean, look, a terrorist does not need to be a member of ISIS or Al-Qaeda to conduct an attack. Some of these terrorists, most dangerous terrorists that these organizations ever recruited, it was online. It was people they never met, they never spoke to. They sent them training videos online, just like the Boston bombers, and let them do it themselves. So it really shocks me, it bothers me, if someone who have worked in that world, who have dived in that world in the deep levels, that the new generation agents or the media. I don't know what their point or what. But when you're talking about her, she's charged with 86 years in prison. Her story is that she was arrested. She was actually wanted by the intelligence community right after the arrest of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, which is the planner of 9/11. Her name somehow was brought up. She was called Miss Al-Qaeda, and she ran to Afghanistan. And in 2008, she was arrested. And then in 2010, she was handed to the U.S. And charged with the attempt to murder of an American officer. This is actually someone who, when she was arrested, this is information that's not out there. When she was arrested, they found plans of the New York, is the State Empire Tower.
Empire State
in New
Building,
York, yeah, Empire State Tower in New York. They found another plans for the couple bridges in New York City. And they also find plans of her trying to conduct a possible chemical attack in the United States, because she is a scientist. She specialized in a very different areas in that aspect, and she was trying to conduct a chemical attack. This is very dangerous move right now, because this could be a test. This could be just a way to test the water here in the United States to see how thing goes. And what scares me the most, that I'm scared of, is that this is going to encourage more radical Islamists to conduct similar operations, because now they know they can negotiate with our government. They can take their time and do what they have to do. There might be a possibility, because I do believe if there is a next one, this won't be the last one. The next one will be more professionally done. It will be much more harder to knock down, or it won't be a one guy that we have to take down. And then what are we going to do next? Is release Al-Qaeda prisoners who try to conduct attacks in our country because somehow we have to save our children. This is a very dangerous move that America is going into.
Yeah, you bring up so many good things to be thinking about in this conversation for sure. And one thing that I think is important to say before, and I want to get back to the specifics of the response that day. But one thing I want to be clear to the audience is, like, sitting here in this conversation, we have people who would identify their faith affiliation as Christian and Muslim, and we're having this conversation about terrorism. And I think that's valuable, because some people in the comments on the live stream, and you guys, if you don't know and you're listening to the show now back, and maybe this is the first time you've listened to the show because the title caught your eye or this interests you, we do the show live on my YouTube channel. So we have comments streaming through here, and a lot of people have been talking about the violence of religion and why religious affiliations always breeds violence. I want to assert this, and maybe you guys will agree or disagree. I think everyone is religious. Everyone. It's just the object of our affection. It's what we're devoted to that changes. Even atheists. No one has listen to me here. I think this is really valuable, but I'm biased because it's my opinion. No one has caused more death and destruction in this modern world than communists, and that it's driven by an atheistic philosophy. So it's not just religion in terms of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam that creates violence. It's a human problem. And sometimes it's the most atheistic among us that will create the greatest levels of death and destruction. So leave that to the side, because we're talking about terrorism, the targets that they choose, why they choose it, and how we should respond objectively and honestly. So Butch and Mike, when a situation like this happens in your area, police department gets the call, what's the decision on whether to mobilize SWAT or not? And what from knowledge that you have from talking to people that responded to this incident, what was their response? What was the planning and training that goes into this? And what's the mindset when they're responding to these things?
Yeah, so it was in my backyard, man. So Colleyville, just to kind of give you a setting, is a really affluent area here in Texas. A lot of your Dallas Cowboy teachers, your players, your oil execs and stuff, they live in this town. So it's a very affluent place. So it's something that can happen sort of anywhere. It brings that to light. So as far as the initial response, so I have connections with guys that were responded to this call. Initially, it came out because of the Facebook Live. So this guy took these hostages, and it became clear as a hostage rescue type of a call out fairly quickly, just because it was being live streamed. And so I think that was the initial call for them. And so there's kind of protocols, right? So it can kind of go two different ways. Your active shooter response, which we're hitting every single door and going to neutralize the threat as fast as possible, versus a hostage rescue where, it's more of an elongated call. We're trying to hopefully come to a peaceful resolution and so forth, like you saw in the case on Saturday. So
what are you guys, what was the word on the ground? What were they actually doing? So like in that period between when they knew that there were people inside being held hostage, the hostage taker, the perpetrator in this demanded a phone call to, I think, somebody from a Jewish center in New York and wanted to talk to them. And there was things happening in there, but I guess a lot of people would want to know, well, what's the holdup here? Was it just to try to conserve life, or what were they actually doing on the perimeter during this time? And why would not, at what point did the FBI get involved, and why, versus the local SWAT team handling business in the way that they would normally do it without the FBI? Right.
So I think at this local level, there's a couple perspectives that I understand. So it was a local agency SWAT team that initially responded. It's a regional team, good guys, spun up dudes. But I don't know if it was the information that it was the person that this guy was wanting to contact as a terrorist that I'm sure put it up the chain pretty quickly. So it is a suburb SWAT team. And so I think with that information, it got spun up pretty quickly as far as our FBI group getting involved as well. So
would that be like a multi-jurisdictional SWAT team? Like those are common around here. If you're not like Detroit has its own SWAT team, but if you're like, surrounding areas, they usually have like Western Wayne SWAT and then like Downriver SWAT. Like it's got different areas and they mutual aid, basically. That's what you're saying it was?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So these guys are from different cities. They work together, train together all the time. They're obviously trained in hostage rescue. But as it kind of grew into a longer call out, they wanted more resources, or called for it at least.
Yeah, I do think it's interesting that the HRT came from Virginia. So they spun up really quickly, which is cool, right?
It was a specialized team, right? They called them in, like specific. Yeah.
Which I think is great, right? Like that's awesome technology. That's awesome power. You've got dudes that are, ex-Navy SEALs, ex-Delta, ex-CAG, whatever you want to call it. 3-letter agency guys, the best of the best really in hostage situations. And they were able to get on a plane very quickly and within 11 hours, put an end to this thing. I think that's, it speaks a lot, it speaks volumes.
Yeah. Why not call in Dallas SWAT? Why not call in Fort Worth SWAT?
Well, because this was mental health, right? And if you're dealing with mental health, you want to call in the best of the best from Virginia to really combat mental health. If this was a terrorist, if this was a real terrorist, we would have used Dallas SWAT.
Yeah, but what we really needed to do is get Butch in there. By the way, you're being called Harambe in the chat. You are alive because of your size. So what they needed Harambe to respond to this situation. Butch. What kind of situation similar to this did you ever respond to as a SWAT operator, and what would be going through the minds of those guys showing up like that?
Man, we did some local stuff that was just, a downgraded hostage situation with families. Had a guy take his kid hostage and those kind of barricaded subject type of things. Like Mike said, there's a huge difference between an active attack and a hostage situation. And then, as we joke about the stuff, mental health and some of these things, everybody's making great points and that's all right. But when it starts prompting a team out of Virginia, that kind of tells you they know the level of terrorists that they're dealing with. And there's information that these guys know that they're coming for and bringing and hopefully helping the locals deal with. But anytime you go into these situations, obviously, your own perspective takes the front seat and kind of takes the driver's seat as to, making sure that your skills are there, your head's right, everything that's going on. You want the most information you can get. There's a lot of unknowns walking into a church with probably a church that these guys have never been in. We go into buildings and apartments and churches and synagogues and whatever that you've never seen, you've never been a part of, you don't know the people that are there, you may not know what the suspect looks like. So there's just 1,000 things that constantly run through your mind going, okay, what can I do? Where am I going to be? You have to have huge discrimination. We can't just go in and shoot everybody. You have to find the threat. You got to have legal and moral authority. There's just all kind of things that are running through your head when you walk into these situations. So it's a heart pounding experience, my man. It's something that really gets your blood flowing and really, really ties you to it.
Yeah. It was fortunate for this rabbi, at least he had some sense. We have that clip, right? Let's play we're going to play a clip from the rabbi that was there in his own words about sort of like him crediting some training that he says they had. So let's listen to him.
Rabbi describing to CBS how he used security training he'd had in the past to distract the gunman and save himself and the other 2 men.
The exit wasn't too far away. I told them to go. I threw a chair at the gunman and I headed for the door. And all 3 of us were able to get out without even a shot being fired.
So what do you think about his response there, guys? And I don't know if it's as simple as being able to say what are the 3 best things or the 5 best things that a place of worship can start thinking about right now to make themselves a harder target. Hamody says, hey, this is inspiring more of things like this. And so how can churches and other places of worship be best prepared to handle this? And what do you think of his response?
Yeah, I'll jump on this real quick and then you guys can jump in. So one of the things from the guys that were there, they noticed several times throughout the call out that the hostages were close to doorways several times and had the opportunity to escape, it seemed like, because the gunman was away from them or whatever, but chose not to at that time. So eventually, and he credits training, which is fantastic, they devised a plan to get out. So that's the biggest takeaway I've taken, and I'm taking to our churches that we work with is you can't outsource your safety, and everybody's got to start thinking and start kind of being spun up on developing their own plans and kind of taking that and being empowered themselves so that they can, not wait on somebody to rescue you, but participate in your rescue, really.
Yeah. What else would you add to that, Butch? Anything like as far as like what steps can places of worship take right now? As if anybody's listening to this here and they're active at their place of worship, what is it that you would say? Hey, you need to be thinking about these things, and you need to think about them right now.
Well, that obviously the best time to be prepared is before the event happens. So looking at these situations, seeing that they're going all over the place. Understanding you're a soft target, understanding that, like Mike said, this is an affluent area that still fell victim to essentially a religious terrorist, attack. You need to take steps now, not until the day of, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm a huge advocate. Obviously, traditionally most churches have very good, capable, qualified men and women that are in them that have the ability to carry guns, that could do discriminatory shooting, that can be trained. Mike and I we've done several hundred across Texas and different counties for various churches, several hundred citizens and parishioners and church members that are now armed, that are collected, that have information, that communicate, that prepare, that have video surveillance, that, medical bags, stop the bleed kits, stop the bleed training, all of these things that they're ready to rock and roll. Because you never know what's coming into your church. You don't know. You are invitational. You have to be invitational. You're inviting everybody in. You're glad handing everybody. You're happy you're there, but you still have to have some level of training and things. And so get involved now. Get your church together. Get over the mentality. And I hate to say this, a lot of churches have it. Well, God's got it. We'll just pray and we'll be protected. That's all great. I'm a huge Christian. God's awesome.
Literally, you are a huge Christian.
Literally. Yep. But you gotta recognize that God put you in place. We're here to protect each other, take care of one another. You don't want to just fall, victim to whatever potential situation rolls in. I give this rabbi and his followers there and the hostages tremendous credit for taking some level of action, right? A good plan executed now is better than a perfect plan next week. I think it's exceptional what they did. Whatever it is, they didn't just lay down. They didn't get executed. They took their steps. I can't Monday morning quarterback something that was successful. You got to just say, hey, it worked. Good for them. I would like to say in those situations, having, at that point, you need to start building, recognizing, hey, that this is an issue. We need armed men in the church instead of an 11-hour standoff with the, HRT team stopping it, this, that, and the other. Maybe we could have stopped it in 45 seconds when he walked through the door and a member of the church shot him in the face. So, there's better ways to handle those situations, but you got to prepare now.
So I heard a great interview from the rabbi in this scenario. He was also joined by a Muslim leader in the same community that's only blocks away from the Jewish synagogue. And some of the Jewish leadership in New York is asking for $375 million in federal grant money to fortify Jewish synagogues throughout the United States. I have a problem with that a little bit. I kind of feel like that's the church's on an individual responsibility to protect yourselves. I don't think it's the federal government's job to protect the church,
I don't want
especially
Daddy
not in
Biden
grant
or
money. If
Daddy
you're taking
anybody
$375 million to secure a church, I want my school secured first. You know what I mean? My kids have to go to school. If there's any grant money,
you homeschool your kids, so you're going to fortify your home.
That's true.
You're going to use government money to secure your home, aren't you?
I'm not gonna
you're going to buy guns with government money.
Yeah, I'm all in. But I think it's strange, right? That we're going to spend that we're asking for $375 million from the government to federally protect churches when the church itself is, these churches, a lot of times you hear people call it the industrial church complex versus the industrial military complex, but these churches aren't broke. How much money does it cost?
Some of them are
to secure your church.
Yeah. I don't know. And most churches, though, like statistically are less than, and Butch and Mike are probably more up to date on this. The last stats I looked at, the average Christian congregation in the United States is like 80-ish people. It's not a large thing. We see these like mega church type environments, but most churches, aren't like that at all.
Right. It doesn't seem like it would cost a lot of money to secure 80 people in a church.
What would you guys say though, Butch or Mike, there is a subset of Christianity, for example, and maybe Hamody, you can weigh in too, because maybe there's a subset in Islamic centers and the Muslim faith as well that I just don't know about. But in Christianity, there is a large group of people, whether it's Amish, Mennonite, there's a few other denominations or groups of people, subsets within the Christian faith. They're pacifists. They don't believe in violence. They don't believe in being armed. They don't own guns. They don't serve in the military. They will not become police officers. There's a large group, in fact, that you can't even be a leader in the church if you are a police officer, for example. Not because they necessarily hate cops. They just by faith they distinguish between kingdom responsibilities and earthly responsibilities, and some of those places never the two shall meet. So what would you say about congregations that are pacifists in terms of how do they make themselves a hard target when they're not going to be armed? They don't want a SWAT team. They don't want people to train with weapons. What do you guys, what would you recommend to people like that make themselves a hard target?
Well, there's still a few things you can do. We actually started out with a lot of our churches in that area because they weren't armed. They didn't have the insurance or the ability to be armed. And so we started out with doing some physical assessments of the property and just hardening the target with locks, window breaking stuff. A lot of times changing the culture of the church with leaving all the doors open, people exiting, ingress, egress kind of things, how people come and go, creating some awareness, giving some level of just training on recognizing anomalies, some of those things. Now, you're still going to fall victim. If a guy walks in with a gun, you're still at his mercy, right? But there's a lot of things you can do if you're, like you're saying, a pacifist community that doesn't necessarily believe in that or have the means or the people or whatever. By just changing the culture of the church, locking some of the doors, putting some volunteers that are in place that may or may not be, that are not armed, but they're there as communicators. They can lock down, barricade in place. Probably some of the stuff this rabbi speaking about with his training might have been like the FBI run, hide, fight kind of a thing where, you use modified tools or implements that are in the church, hit him with a chair and haul out the back, those kind of things. So there is other things you can still do and things that we helped, and that's where we started. We progressed essentially into being armed because it's just in the worst case scenario, that's in our belief system kind of the only solution. But there's things that can be done like that.
Hamody, what educate me, if no one else, on this? Is there similar groups in the Muslim faith where they are pacifists, like they wouldn't want to have armed people at the mosque, or they don't want those kinds of things happening there, and they're in a similar situation as far as like needing to figure out how to be a harder target?
There is actually nothing in Islam that indicates that, you can't protect yourself or anything like that. But when it comes to the Islamic faith in general, when you're looking at this topic right now, what's happening and everything, as you know, Islam is not a threat to society. Majority of Muslims happen to be peaceful people. What we should be more worried about is the radical Islam. It's the Wahhabism that is actually the Salafis, where ISIS, Al Qaeda, all the same. All the terrorist groups come from the same ideology, other than Iran, from the same ideology. And you have to find these nests and control them. You have to look during 9/11. The U.S. intelligence underestimated these groups, and look at what they did. They did 9/11. They conducted one of the biggest attacks in U.S. history on a U.S. soil. When it comes to these individuals, there's a lot of hubs for them, specifically in the UK. The UK has a very large group of radical Islamists that practice Wahhabism. They're Salafis, and they are very radicalist, hate the West, has such an anger. And because of the weakness of the British government, these individuals became very powerful and more populated over there. Perhaps here in America, we don't have those much, because we used to be, after 9/11, we used to be on top of things like that. But now it's a very different era. It's changed a lot. Now our agencies are more worried about domestic terrorists, more worried about parents among a school board meeting. The stuff like that really got our society busy, especially what's been going on in our country for the last 8 years between the media, the political parties, and the war among us here as Americans has truly gave an opportunity for radical Islamists to rethink it twice about what they want to do, because we are vulnerable right now, if you think about it. And when it comes to radical Islamists, we have to look at the holes that Akram that used and to come into the United States, and how he got into the United States. And we have to really cover these holes before it's too late, because many Americans or our intelligence agencies or anybody in our government thinks that the next terrorist attack is going to be Arabs coming from Arab countries, which we already have restrictions on these individuals coming into the US, but that's not the case. They have a whole entire population in the UK, so you can get people with a British passport could come to your country easily. People who has Canadian passport, people who has a French passport, people who has different nationalities. So our intelligence agencies needs to put their pants on, stop worrying about what's going on in the country and about school board meetings and parents and trying to distinguish them as a domestic terrorist when you have the most vicious terrorist organizations in the world literally planning on their own. You have one individual that figured out a way to infiltrate our country with a blink of an eye and had a criminal records. These are holes in the process that we have to stop before it's too late, because our enemies are not only coming from Middle Eastern countries, they're not coming only from Muslim countries, they could come from anywhere. And there is a proof of that is that the recent ISIS fighters, among ISIS, the majority was Europeans, people from Germany, Belgium, the United Kingdom, France, everywhere. So what you're facing is right now a multinational enemy that has capabilities, have individuals from different ethnicities, different background. They don't even have to be Arabs. They don't even have to be of a brown skin. It could be just a white guy with a blue eyes, but you don't know who he's been radicalized by, who has he been recruited or brainwashed by. There is a lot of proofs that the radical Islamic communities that are in Australia, in the UK, that's where they are, most of them are, happen to start to recruit people who are of a different background. It means people who do not have any Islamic background in any sort. And there's a proof of that. Jake Baladi, who was recruited out of Australia at 16 years old, a blue eyes, blonde hair kid, blew himself up in Hamody, Iraq in 2017 with a car bomb, killing numerous of Iraqi soldiers. And he was among ISIS. So you just never know what the age, what the ethnicities is. And our intelligence agencies needs to do their job, because we did our job here in this country after 9/11, and it was too late, way too late. And we need to stop, as the police officer mentioned earlier, is we need to take care of things before they happen. We need to avoid everything before it happens, and we need to really figure out a plan to cover these holes in our security and who we grant visas to. And that was a really easy haul for someone to come from the UK, has been placing signs of radicalizing of Islamic State signs in his town, and all of a sudden he gets a visa to the United States, regardless of his criminal record, and buy a gun and take hostages in a synagogue. So that just goes to show you that we need to take this seriously, and we need to stop dividing on one another and more worried about what's happening inside of the country and what parents are doing in a school board meeting. Our intelligence agencies need to do their job.
Hamody, go ahead. Well,
go ahead, Butch.
I love it, man. Hamody makes excellent points, and he actually kind of creates a segue into the vision of why Mike and I created Guardian Response, and that's for self-reliance, understanding that the government's a failure. I mean, bottom line, we talk about narratives and agendas and how this guy got into the country and all this other stuff. We cannot depend on the government. You, Mike, we work for the government on a local level, and I'll tell you personally, they're terrible. I mean, you get good men that do good things, and we rise above, and we're actually kind of fighting even our own administration and doing certain things because of their ignorance, their abilities, their perspectives, name it, claim it, right? But Hamody is right. Our FBI is I'm just going to say questionable. Okay,
sure.
Right? Okay.
And you brought a great point. I mean, you're spot on. Unfortunately, not that I want to take the whole entire agency as an FBI that are not doing its job correctly, but you have to understand that the generation of 9/11 produced you some of the best interrogators, some of the best intelligence agents, some of the best field agents, because war makes strong men, and it makes people think differently about certain things. You have to understand that generation is pretty much retired and gone. And now you're dealing with a whole new generation that's pretty much psychologically affected by what's happening in the country. Yep. And our country is so busy focusing on what's happening in the school board meeting versus of what our enemies are planning to do. Because we pulled out of Afghanistan. There is a lot of geographically changes in the world right now that is going to give a radical Islamist an opportunity to have a strong comeback, because they could find a safe haven a lot more easier by having less presence of U.S. troops in the Middle East, and they can plan a massive attack. This could be a false test to test the water, to test the response of the response of local law enforcement and intelligence agencies, and see how that happens. And that's the scary part. And as you said, we can't depend on the government. If it comes to your own protection, you got to protect yourself. The person sitting in front of you operated for 5 years undercover collecting information on terrorists in Iraq during the most vicious 5-year war in Iraq. And I will tell you this, that I did not depend on the U.S. government or any intelligence agencies for my own safety. I was in charge of my own safety. And that's why I'm sitting here in front of you alive today. So people need to take their safety to their hands, and they need to be in charge of their own safeties and don't depend on anybody, because not everybody is perfect at what they do.
Can I ask you this, Hamody? If you look at terrorism by the numbers, right? If you just Google terrorism by the numbers, you're going to get briefly about like the four main groups that create terrorism around the world. They're all Islamic related. They're all Islamic radical Muslim related organizations. But if you look at any report, if you look at the first 5 reports on Google, they're only going to briefly touch on that. And then the rest of the report is going to be on this new wave of right-wing radical terrorism that's happened in the United States. I saw in one study that like it accounted for like 63 people were killed in the United States by right-wing terrorist activities. You couldn't find anything that was Muslim related. Although in 2014, I read like worldwide, right-wing radicalists between the UK and here was somewhere in the tens of people versus radical Islamic terrorists in the tens of thousands of people. Why is one? Because Muslims are the biggest target of Muslims. So if you look at deaths by number in terrorism, Muslims are actually targeted by other Muslims more than anybody else. So Christians, Jews are not being targeted by Muslims near as much as mosques are being blown up by other Muslims. What do Muslim people do to protect their mosques? Do they have training? Do they have armed guards inside these mosques?
No, they don't. They absolutely don't. I can assure you that Muslims, mosque and everything don't, especially if they're the opposite of what's going on. But when you're talking about mosques that are pro-radical Islamist groups and they're just kind of sitting there chill, of course they're not going to expect anybody to attack them because they might be agreeing with whatever is happening, or they might be they sympathize with those actions. So again, that goes back to the type of Muslim groups you are dealing with. And
do Muslim mosques here in America generally protect themselves?
No, not necessarily. I've never seen one with an armed guard in the front. Some might do have a local police that will stand in the front or do something, depending if it's a large size of a mosque or it's a big community center. What I think it needs to be done personally, that we need to take a step back and never underestimate our enemies. Our enemies planned the biggest attack in U.S. history from Mazar-Sharif, Afghanistan, which is a small, shitty town in Afghanistan, where they planned the biggest attack in U.S. history on our country. So I kind of believe right now in my heart, the way I feel things is that our intelligence agencies are underestimating this enemy, are giving them more leverage to operate a little bit more freely. And there is a reason why, Eric, you brought up why are we focused on white supremacists and domestic terrorism? It's because it's not the intelligence agency's fault that are focusing on that or establishing a counterterrorism units that are specialized in that. It's because the current government, the current administration is leaning towards fighting domestic terrorism more than fighting a radical Islamist who might actually take a whole entire building down or kill more Americans than anybody else. So the truth is, we need to stop running after YouTubers and Instagrammers for arguing with us about their opinion, and somehow we need to really get back to work.
Well, that's kind of why I bring it up, because I feel like I feel like we're more concerned like with a narrative of trying to push and I only bring this up because I went at this with an open hand, not knowing anything about it. And I just wanted to see what like terrorism by the numbers look like, because when you look at the synagogue, when you try to look at the synagogue hostage situation, I mean, you really don't hear anything about Islamic radicalism, and they're pushing so hard on mental illness and then quickly talking about right-wing extremism. And I saw that somebody made in the comments that what am I trying to say is why I'm wanting to know from an intel perspective is why are we trying not to make this? Because it seems like to me that this was an Islamic radicalist doing radical shit.
It is. It's a fact. This is an Islamic radical attack. The guy has been posting signs in his communities that are sympathizing with radical Islamist group. It's not our problem that the British government did not notice that little detail. When, as I said, radical Islamists do not have to be someone who trained in Afghanistan. They can train in their own mom's basement, watch videos, and they can be inspired by the radical organization. So what I think personally is that everything I brought up in this show, it's a fact. You can go look it up. You can go, there's history that goes back to these individuals. There's connections somehow. There's radicalizations that are being done by a local Muslim imam in their community, or there's a lot of facts that goes into this. And this is very dangerous time in our society, because you have to understand psychologically, this country is now more busy because of the media. The media is leaning towards domestic terrorists, parents who are in a school board meeting. And I said that a lot, many times. And I'm saying that I hope that people in the intelligence community could watch this and understand that we need to stop wasting our time. The last 8 years should be deleted of our history, because all we did, we spent it on biting on one another and trying to choose one political candidate over the other. But that doesn't mean the enemies of the United States, the real enemies, are going to be waiting for you for this to settle up and not attack you. They'll attack you at times when you're vulnerable and busy and not thinking about it. And this is also the same media that is calling this a mental health problem. It's the same media that also didn't notice 9/11 when it happened until the second plane hit the tower. So the media unfortunately has a very big affection in our society. And nowadays, specifically, it's affecting everything in our society, affecting our intelligence community, affecting the quality of the human being that we have that working in the government. When you work in the intelligence line, or when you work for the country intelligence agencies, you should not be a bias in any way. Like, you should not be worried about any political party. And this is what I have seen lately, that the FBI started to lean towards more political movements recently in the last few years, because people doubted its trust and still doubting its trust. And they need to clean up house. They need to get their reputation back. And by doing that, by putting the political aspects outside of the box and worry about our national security, because your job is not to do things that a current administration wants to do because they don't like the people that are arguing with them on social media and somehow want to distinguish the people they don't agree with as a domestic terrorism. And somehow Al-Qaeda is getting visas into the country, entering the country, buying a gun, and no one knows about it. No one had any idea. That's scary to me. And it shows me that the next level is going to be very dangerous, and that we need to really get to work now to make sure that another 9/11 or another disaster does not happen again in the United States. And look, ISIS lost their battles in Iraq. They lost the territories they control. But ISIS realized one thing too. They realized the best thing and the best strategy they ever use is going back to being the sleeping cells. It means to operate under the ground and to operate like ghosts, where nobody can see them, where nobody can locate where they are. So don't underestimate an enemy that's been defeated. They've been defeated, but they're not dead yet. They always make a comeback. And this country needs to really
you can never defeat an ideology, because it's not isolated to, like you've brought up, Australia, all around the world, the UK. Like, it's not we're not fighting against just one particular identifiable place and people. It's an ideology that can spread like a cancer. Butcher Mike, what is something that, from those that responded on the ground, your conversations with them, those operators that responded that day, what is something that they have conveyed to you maybe about that response, whether it's, hey, this was just business as usual, it was another day for us, versus anything unusual in terms of that response that they've communicated to you, that when people watch this or listen to this, they are not going to ever hear on the media? Mainstream media, I guess I should say.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's a couple aspects to it, I guess, because I was closest to it. I'll answer first, but the guys I talked to, it was somewhat business as usual. The original team that responded, the FBI, they're doing their work, and I guess from that lowest level, knuckle dragger, SWAT guy, that's what we do. We do hostage rescue. We do that work. So I think kind of these top tier conversations with terrorism and ideology and things like that, I don't know that ever got into the way they operated or their planning or anything like that. I think they did the best they could with what they had as far as information went. I was half a mile away at one of our churches that we serve, so it ended up being kind of the media hub. So we had all media there. We also had the hostages' family there, so we're trying to keep them secure while they were even being able to contact the hostages in there during the event. So just kind of
you were involved at a level of this at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't, to a certain degree. Yeah, we were just supporting them. Yeah. So just supporting them. We, providing security, again, bringing our volunteers. We're not relying on the government for this stuff. to kind of help out as best we could. So, but yeah, we had the hostage, his families with us, and kind of just supporting them and law enforcement as they're trying to communicate information and stuff. A couple of things, though, I think that I heard from some of the SWAT guys is as far as preparation goes. Some things that church members can take with them is actually having some form, or just thinking ahead, like we talked about earlier, right now, of having floor plans, access control, camera access, all that stuff in a place that's accessible so that we can pass that on to our LE brothers and sisters so they can do work. But thinking ahead and having that plan ahead of time, they had a facilities guy that was able to give very pertinent information as far as the glass, the laminate on the glass and so forth, so their snipers could do their work. So all those kind of details is important, but if you don't think about it ahead of time, we're going to be chasing it and be behind the curve. So all that kind of stuff can kind of help that law enforcement community.
Yeah. Is there, in part of you guys' training, is there like, do you guys work with local law enforcement? Like, I think like as a beat cop, I think majority of beat cops probably have several churches, right? Because there's like a church every block these days. So I think generally speaking, every beat officer probably has at least 3 churches in their area. Do you guys in your training work on getting information to them to be proactive, like saying, hey, we're just going to drop this schematic off of the church just to let you guys have it in case something ever happens? You guys will have a full layout of what our church looks like from the inside.
Well, unfortunately, at the local law enforcement level, they're just not to that degree. Working with that, because we have several private schools that we work with. So there's software that we are working with so that law enforcement agencies have access to that, which does have floor plans and so forth. So that integration is getting there. But we do encourage all the folks, our clients, to work with their local law enforcement to have that relationship. You're not going to have every beat cop having seen your layout and so forth. But if you can have that handshake, have that conversation, and know that you do have armed folks, if you do have that plan in your congregation, it goes a long, long way.
Yeah, I remember having a church reach out to my department, and they actually said that they were doing some training on active shooter stuff, and they wanted us to come in on at our leisure, that we could just go by the church anytime, and they would let us in and give us a tour of the church, that just in case there was ever if there was ever an active shooter, we would be kind of familiar with the layout. I thought that was always a pretty smart thing to do, a really nice proactive thing to do. And I think it should be required for schools as well. If you're a beat cop, you should be forced to take a tour of every school in your beat, if not your district and church.
100%. We had our computer system in car. We had all of the schools and apartment buildings, schools, and in theory, it could have been anybody. Churches could have submitted their blueprints basically with notes on them. And so if we were dispatched to a particular address, you could hit the map button and it would actually pull up that schematic. And so while you're on the way to the call, depending on the information that you have en route, you're already, if you're not already familiar, by being proactive and touring your schools and touring your worship facilities and other targets like that, then we were working with local community schools and churches, apartment buildings, things like that, to put those schematics inside. That way, if we were responding to that, we have a glance inside our car, knowing like room numbers or where the hallways were, where are the restrooms, where are access points in and out of the building, or things like that. So I think that's a huge hard target improvement, I would guess, in communities that would be willing to do that.
Yeah, Mike, I think that's awesome. A lot of that stuff is based on the individual officer. We had a few schools that cooperated and had kind of a similar system with some video surveillance that was exceptional. Churches and people that are out there, I just recommend that you, like Mike said, you network and connect with your local law enforcement. Invite them into your church, invite them into training in your church, get their SWAT team in your church, get those things kind of going, because they're looking for places to train, they're looking for places to see. Sometimes we just got to take that that initial step and a little bit of action and do something to create that relationship and network that opportunity.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah,
man.
I think that is probably, the most important, or one of the most important aspects of securing yourself as a church. And I'm glad you guys brought that up. But yeah, definitely working with local law enforcement is always going to be the key. What do you guys think of the outcome that the FBI? So the FBI went in, the hostages were out. The FBI went in. Sounds like they got in a gun battle. I'm not sure. I only heard one shot fired. Hoping that was just the FBI doing their thing. What do you guys think about the ending of this from a SWAT's perspective?
Well, I mean, it's a perfect ending in my opinion. Bad guy goes
sure.
wherever he goes, and good guys go home, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, I love that ending as far as that goes. Anytime there's a situation like that, I think there has to be, even though you're standing there for 11 hours, how many other hours those guys were set up? It was an 11-hour event. Those operators were on the side of that church in that armored car, networking, connecting, running command posts, doing all the stuff they were doing for multiple hours. So you're on edge, you're ready to go, you're on high alert the entire time. An incident like that, it unfolds before your eyes. You don't know that the rabbi just threw a chair at a guy inside.
Right, because they did that in the middle of, I guess what the citizens called it is a changing of the guard. The citizen witnesses said it was almost a changing of the guard. There was a different team coming in to replace the other team, and then suddenly the door flies open.
Yeah. So, and that, that happens. You got to get relief. You're standing on the side of the house for 6 hours.
You got to take a piss. You got to take a shit.
Yeah, you got to take a leak, man. You got to get something to drink. You're freezing, you're hot, you're cold, you're whatever. I mean, the elements and reality of life is there. So that stuff happens. I think, again, considering they did an excellent job. When those doors fly open, those people run out. You see the suspect come out with a gun. He runs back in the church. You don't know what's in that church. You may have, or into that synagogue. You may have an idea. You don't know what's in that building. You don't know the layout. You don't know if there's other people. You don't know. So you have to breach, make entry, get in, search, discriminate, use deadly force if necessary, escalate, de-escalate, whatever you got to do. And all of that happens in literally the time that it takes for that door to swing open. A couple of hostages run out. You see the guy with the gun run back into the building, and that's go time. It's like, man, go. So you have to be prepared. Your explosive breach has already had to been set. Your charges for the doors, your windows, your team's got to communicate. Everybody's got to zip their pants, get their rifles, and run their butts in there, right? Whatever's got to happen, it's all got to happen in that instant. So it's hard for me to criticize and say, oh, they could have done it faster, they could have done it better. They got in there, they got the guy. No good guys were harmed in the making of that wonderful film. So,
do you guys go back as guardians for your company? Do you guys go back, watch that video? Are you trying to maybe talk to that synagogue just to learn more on that scenario so that you can be better prepared when you're going into other churches and talking to them about hostage situations, active shooter situations? Or, what do you guys do to gain and to constantly figure out and stay ahead of what's going on in these events?
Yeah, that's super important, man. We're always debriefing with people that have experienced these kind of things because they'll bring their own perspective. There's a vantage point from each individual that was there. They'll have a perspective. We're lucky that, my partner Mike, he's got connections to the law enforcement end of that church and other things that are all right there. So he can kind of get that inside scoop, create some of those opportunities. But absolutely, there's a significant difference in what you read on the media or see on the media or the narrative that they're trying to propel across this country in various reasons. We've talked about this whole show. And then sitting down with the guy that was sitting there as the hostage and saying, hey, what did you see? What did you experience? What was this terroristic-like event going through your mind? How was he, all of these things. What can we do better? What would you have done? And every once in a while, you get a nugget of pretty good information that you can, we can develop and train and pass on to other churches.
And Hamody, go ahead, sorry, Mike.
Oh, I was just gonna say, from Hamody's perspective, maybe some insight he has, because what's most valuable about this conversation is that we're having it, and not a lot of other people are. Not a lot of people out there in any kind of mainstream media are having this conversation, which is why it's so important and valuable, I think. And what's crazy to me is I had to go digging a little bit on the internet to find out about this dude, like, for example, that there were 2 teenagers that I can't find any more information arrested in the UK that were connected to him, even though
it's not terrorism.
The public facing thing is this isn't terrorism, this is mental health.
Right.
So why are 2 teenagers being detained in the UK connected to him if this is just a mental health crisis?
And that was my big, and I somebody in the comments has sensed my frustration with talking about right wing extremism. I mean, to ask him where I'm getting at. And so that is my point. That is my frustration, because when we were trying to research this show, any kind of data that you're trying to get, you cannot get the data that you want. You can only get the data that the government's trying to give you. And it was really frustrating. This was probably one of the more frustrating attempts at journalism that I've ever had. And that's essentially why I called Hamody, and in hopes that he would answer his phone and talk to me for a little bit, and to ask the questions of like, yo, what's going on? Like, why am I not able to find this information? You know, we do hear about these 2 kids, these 2 teenagers in this suburb of Manchester, UK. But then again, we're not talking about it as terrorism. We're talking about it as mental health. So from an intel, and this was my question when I called you, I believe yesterday, was why does is this something that the intel community wants Americans to know because they're working on a bigger picture? But why is it that we're not getting fed the information that is pertinent to this case?
I wish that is, I would like to believe that they're working on something for a bigger picture. And I'm sorry to laugh about that, because my scary thing is the thing that I'm scared about the most is they're not aware of what's happening. It got to be a connection to this individuals and who he was talking to in the last few months. Who was he in communication with? Where did he practice his religious practices? Where did he go? What mosque? What group he belongs to? The friends that he's associated with? This could be bigger. As I said, this might not be anything crazy. This might be a random testing the water in America, seeing the response. And I was shocked that they spent 11 hours dealing with this. I mean, I'm sure the police officers will have a better response to this, because this is their job. This is what they do. But I'm surprised 11 hours before taking this guy down. Why didn't we do it earlier? And we have done it before. But when it comes to considering this, whether this is an act of terrorism or not, my question will come to this to you, Eric, is were the Boston bombers an act of terrorism? Was that considered an act of terrorism?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah. Right. So was any relationship or any meeting physically between the Boston bombers or the Islamic State or Al-Qaeda? The answer is no. They have never met. They have never spoken. They only chatted online, and they just sent the guy a video. He said, I want to make a bomb. And they sent him a video. And he followed the video and he did it. But we still considered it an act of terrorism because they did it based on a radical Islamist ideology. They weren't just some random Christian guy that attacked a church or just some random guy from a different background. Not saying that any Muslim does something crazy is being considered an act of terrorism. But the question remains is, was this guy inspired? Was he radicalized? Was he religious? And the answers are going to come yes. So when he did this based on a radical ideology. And the person he's asking to release out of prison is called Miss Al-Qaeda. It was the first woman to be associated with Al-Qaeda. So there are so many facts in this that it's really hard to make this a mental issue. And we have showed weakness in this process and how we dealt with him. And I'm sorry to say that because I don't mean to offend any of the SWAT teams or anything. And I know they follow orders and they have people above that control everything. But we showed kind of weakness into how we dealt with this situation. And that's what scares me. And the police officers will probably give me a better response to that. That's what scares me is that the next one, we're all thinking about how to protect churches and how to protect everything. The next one might not be in a church. The next one may be in a mall. The next one may be in a school. The next one may be in a daycare, for God's sake, where people can run or get out, or you just never know what this enemy is capable of. And I think all of us as society should be aware that when radical Islamist groups in the world think about conducting an operation, the first country they think of, our number one target in the world for them, is the United States. They're not going to think about attacking any other country because they don't consider them to be a rival enemy. We are considered to be the first #1 rival to radical Islamists. They do believe in their ideology that America and Israel is behind all the problems that are occurring in the world, and somehow they need to eliminate us out of the face of the planet. And that has always been the goal. So we need to protect ourselves as society, because just because we pulled out of Afghanistan, just because we made a deal with the Taliban, it doesn't mean we can trust this deal. It doesn't mean these individuals won't bite us in the back. These individuals stabbed us in the back once, even though when we helped them against the Soviet in Afghanistan to kick the Soviet out, and they still gave Bin Laden a safe haven, and because they share the same ideology. Yes, that the Taliban in Afghanistan now has made an agreement with a government. Do understand that if they do launch any attacks on U.S. soil from their country, we're coming back to whip their ass out of the face of earth again. But that doesn't mean this will remain forever. You don't know what leadership will change one day in these countries. And what I'm saying, or the point I'm trying to make, is radical Islamic groups are not going to leave you alone. And if they're not going to fight you as America or Americans, who else do they have to fight? Who else really bothers them other than you? Or you are the #1 rival they think of. So we should not go and take a nap and not think about what's happening around us, thinking that, oh, my God, we just accomplished one of the best accomplishment in U.S. history. We ended the longest war in U.S. history, and we brought our troops home, and we should be all safe now. That is not the case. We can't lie to an American citizen and tell them now, this is all over. No, this is not all over. This is actually getting a reset to start all over, and we're going back to the beginning, and we all know what the beginning was and how it started. It was 9/11. And it shocked you as American because they hit you pretty hard and you were not prepared. Or your intelligence agencies had little pieces. If they put it together, they could have prevented that, but they didn't, because you need a lot of strength to put your head into this ideology to understand it. And I saw people in the comment mentioned before I finished, mentioned a small thing that says, can you kill an ideology? A lot of people, oh, it's impossible to beat the ideology. It's a lie. You can absolutely kill the ideology by eliminating the ideology, by actually putting more educators in the Islamic communities to educate young Muslims so they don't get radicalized and they get picked by those thugs in the Wahhabi or the Salafi background Muslim clerks. And you can absolutely stop the ideology when you hunt down the scholars and the educators that radicalize people. When you hunt them down,
I mean, that's what we do here in the United States. We strive for everything to get rid of an ideology. Tear down statues, you take down flags, you take down all those things. Like, that should absolutely should be done in any form of terrorism, whether it be a Muslim, Jewish, Christian, whatever. I mean, we absolutely try to kill an ideology here in the United States, but we're not going to touch if it's a Muslim ideology. Does that make sense?
Because the media is deciding what's right and wrong for you to do.
Because I think it's funny that, and I've followed the Terrorist Whisperer for a couple of years now, is that you actually took down via social media terrorists in the United States that were pilots from Syria.
From Iraq.
From Iraq. And you went on Fox News about it.
Yeah.
And it was just this really big deal that you were able to decipher terrorist plots from social media, yet you are now shadow banned, probably worse than anybody that I know. As shadow banned, I was actually dropped as a follower of you, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And I finally called you and said, dude, I've had to refollow you 3 times in the last month because I keep being dropped as a follower of you. What do you think about that?
I mean,
so you use social media to take down real terrorists, but yet you're shadow banned on social media.
What happened was with that individual is he was an Iraqi pilot for the Iraqi military who was trained in Lockheed Martin. Is that the name of the? Yeah. So in Texas, and right after the killing of Soleimani, the guy could not keep his emotions and express in social media about how he felt about it. This was the same individuals that flew over U.S. troops.
Wait, did you say he was in Texas?
He was in Texas. He trained Texas. He was trained in Texas. He have attended gun ranges in Texas, and he was trained as a pilot in one of the most famous American companies that make the airplane, make the F-16s. And that just goes to show you. And at the time I have notified the FBI, the guy was in Texas. He is now a military member. He's now has access above our U.S. troops, and his plane is loaded. And I am 100% believer the FBI or any other intelligence agencies were not aware of this information prior to me seeing him. I would love to say, oh, they were ahead of the game. Trust me, I know my own people. They were not ahead of the game. They had no idea this was happening. But I took advantage of the guy because the guy only posted this for about not longer than 3 minutes and then deleted his emotions. He couldn't control his emotions, and he kind of blew as his undercover. Who was he loyal to and who was he working for? And I immediately screenshotted within like a minute and was able to get hold of this individual and where he was in Iraq. But to go back to like how this is, you have to be careful about the new constitution that the media is writing for you over what's right or what's wrong. There is no reason for social media to shadow ban me or drop followers because I'm not educating or I'm not promoting violence against Muslims or other peaceful people. I'm friends with so many Muslims who I share the same background with, and I'm not exactly talking about that. But because the media created a code called racism, created a code that called racism that they couldn't, it's like a mask they can place on anything they want to shadow ban. So if I go talk about ISIS, somehow they're going to say this is a hate speech. And I am not talking about my best friends in kindergarten. I'm talking about the most radical Islamist organization in the world. I don't have any other nice words to say about them or to say it in a way to convince Mark Zuckerberg that how I talk about ISIS and Al-Qaeda. I don't know what their rules or what they want. But if Mark Zuckerberg and this companies and social media has a better way of talking about ISIS and Al-Qaeda than I do, then they need to show me how I can do this, because this is the information and the facts that I get about these individuals. This is exactly what this ideology promotes. But just because if you Muslims get offended and say, oh, this is against what I think, it doesn't mean it's not true. It is true. And what I'm saying is we are not in a war with Islam. We're in a war with radical Islam. And radical Islam is a major problem. And we need to really be aware of. This is not going to end. This is going to come back. And it scares me because when these guys hit, they hit hard. And it scares me that it will be too late. And me and Eric are probably way too old right now to go to war again, but the new generation will. But you got to protect yourself, and you got to worry about your national security. Stop worrying about parents who are arguing with school board members and people who are arguing about the vaccine.
Well, the scary part is that the new generation that has to face these enemies, we are self-defeating, in my opinion.
Yeah.
We're doing a disservice to ourselves because we're not equipping the current generation that's going to have to fight this next war, that's going to have to confront these ideologies and these enemies. We are softening ourselves to the realities because we want to put that mask on it and call it something that it's not. And we're attributing these things to the wrong people. This narrative is weakening us. And I don't know, there's all sorts of we could talk conspiracy, we could talk reality, why that is, who's driving these narratives and why, but it's not helping us. That's
and
for sure.
I'll tell you, you're spot on. Look into 9/11. Look into how 9/11 happened, right? You want to look into it. 9/11, people did not believe, even this country, even this government, even the president himself of this country back then, did not believe they were under attack until the second plane hit the second tower. Okay?
Yeah.
And that goes to show you that you had zero information about these plans, that you are not ahead of the game. And it was way too late for you to get yourself and protect yourself and shut down the country so you can protect your citizens. So to be honest with you, that the media has created this phobic, the media has created this coding of whether you, what's okay and what's not okay. And this is a very dangerous time, a very dangerous generation, because this generation.
Iraq wasn't like that, though. The Iraq media was truthful. They didn't try to. The Iraq media never had a narrative, right?
I mean, Saddam had.
Just kidding.
Saddam had 2 channels, and to be.
Those were all truth, right?
But that's the truth, man. That's like how it is that the media is creating this generation. The media is educating these people. People don't want to believe that radicals are or dangerous to them. And you have people who came up with a conspiracy theory saying 9/11 was an inside job, accused the U.S. government of it, right? And I saw that in the comments also. Someone said, well, 9/11 is an inside job. You know, I'm sorry to say that in your show, you'll be an idiot to underestimate the most dangerous terrorists in the world. You underestimate the knowledge of Al-Qaeda. You will be a moron to underestimate saying, well, it was the U.S., because there's no way these guys could pull this off. If you don't believe these guys can pull this off, go look at your casualties number between Iraq and Afghanistan and how many people got injured and got killed. Over 4,700 people died in Iraq. Over 30,000 people were injured in Iraq alone, and not to count the casualties in Afghanistan. So do you believe these guys can't pull something off? Do you believe these guys are not capable or not educated or not dangerous to you in any way? You'll be an idiot to believe that. And that's these kind of conspiracy theories. It's among the nowadays generation, because all this young generation I talk to right now will turn around and says, don't you believe that 9/11 was an inside job? And I will turn around and say, do you know Khalid the Sheikh Mohammed? And they say, no. And I said, how do you believe in an inside job when you don't even know the planner of 9/11 and what he's capable of or what his education background is? And it's kind of hard, because this generation has been told 20% of the truth. And it was manipulated by the media to make them believe that the biggest attack in U.S. history was not made by radical Islamists. It was made by America, by the American government that killed their own citizen. And that is why I stop the line with conspiracy theories. There are some people who saying the truth and they get labeled as a conspiracy theorist. And there are people who put conspiracy theory out there to the furthest level, and they can't be stopped. And it's dangerous to our society. It's dangerous to all of our kids who are watching TV at home or have access to the internet, that some people out there sitting in their basements deciding whether something is a fact or not, when they don't have the knowledge or the background in counterterrorism. And that's what scares me the most.
To wrap, guys, this has been awesome, and I hope that the people listening to this, there's been a ton of positive feedback in the comments, and I have a sense that the people that listen to our show will want to share this one up, and I'm asking you guys too, because we are going to get I'm shadow banned. I have been stuck at a certain level of followers because speaking the truth. People get unfollowed from me. It's happening to you, Hamody. And Butch and Mike, the more you tell the truth about what you do, you'll feel this wrath too of mainstream media. And Eric is already starting to learn the ways of social media as we've dove into this podcast and the strangeness that is out there. And so the only way to combat that is for enough of you guys that are listening to these kinds of conversation to share the heck out of this, to tell people that they need to listen, to tell people to invest in these kinds of conversations. But to sort of like round this out, for those that are like looking from the outside, the average listener to this show, not just us, but the average person that's going to hear this, and they're going to see what they see on the media about this hostage situation at a synagogue in the middle of affluent nowhere, Texas, that no one's ever heard of. When they see this, what is the message, the one sentence, the three sentences, the heart of what you want them to know? How can they help? How can they help educate themselves and others on these kinds of situations as just a normal, average person? What can they do to help?
I'm just going to start to referring to radical Islamists as my cousin's exclamation mark next to it.
Perfect.
That's I think that's what's the way is going to be acceptable. It's to say my cousins today did something terrible in the world, and I don't think they would think this has anything to do, because
you got to talk in code.
Own family.
Yeah, you just got to start talking in code.
The world, man, it's a new world.
But I love how, we started in on the synagogue breakdown, and we love breakdowns, right? And I like the police aspect of the breakdowns. I love getting into it about tactics, about policies, and why cops do certain things. So when we had brought up doing the synagogue breakdown, that's what I went into this to do. Let's look at the tactics. Let's look at this. But really, all your research, everything that you do, everything you talk to, the whole conversation is about mental health, and it somehow dives its way into other things that are going around the United States and does not touch anything on what we discussed here today. And I think having discussions that are honest and truthful are way more important than things that make us feel good. And so I wonder, is the media just trying to get us to hate people with mental illness? Is that what it is? Is that why we're making mental illness the problem in this world? I saw Babylon Bee posted obviously we know that Babylon Bee is not real, right? They post fake things to be funny. You're familiar with that, right, guys?
I mean, you're a producer, so earlier I took a bunch of meds here before.
Okay. Well, the Babylon Bee, they had made a fake post that was really funny, and it said, young child being bullied and secluded at school for not being diagnosed with a mental illness. And that was the title of the article. And I thought, wow, how true that is these days.
You got to be you're in a minority group if you're not diagnosed with ADHD.
Right.
Now
I hope I don't get to be considered a mentally ill person myself for taking so many meds.
Butch and Mike, what's your final word on how people that are listening to this show can participate in a positive direction for these kinds of situations?
Well, let me throw one thing out there real quick. Speaking of obviously the media's got an agenda for the mental health, and call me crazy, but there was a long push for red flagging people with mental health issues to take away your Second Amendment right in this country.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's easier to propel a mental health agenda in the American public to say you have a mental health issue, whether it's something as simple as ADHD, and you check that red box or that doctor diagnoses you because you get that kid in, and then you can't purchase a firearm as a citizen, not as a terrorist, because we know that we're allowing terrorists in the country. We've got open borders. They're coming up through Mexico. Nobody cares. It's craziness. And call me nuts, but there's definitely an agenda to propel a mental health issue, protecting radical Islamists and doing things that can inhibit the average American male and female that are good people from owning a gun.
Yeah.
That's a very great point, because
bravo. I didn't even I hadn't thought about that perspective on this, and man,
and now that you're thinking about it, if you listen to Biden's speech on this, the whole thing was briefly about mental illness and about how does he just get a gun. And now you correlate the two together, mental illness, guns, man, you just blew the doors wide open. You're probably going to get Hillary for that.
There's a good chance, fellas. Hey, if I suicide myself, but it wasn't me, I promise. So,
okay.
There's no way you're
a mentally stable person.
And I love how you just said, call me nuts. Nobody's calling you anything. Look at your size. Look at how ugly you are. Nobody's going to call you anything ever. Don't worry about that.
Well, guys, we have to recognize, and I think there's a lot of things in this country right now, and then we'll go back to the question. I'm sorry, Mike the cop. I don't mean to.
Oh, you're good, man.
There is an agenda being propelled by our government. There is an agenda being propelled by our media. It is not American friendly. It is not self-reliance. They do not want police officers with opinions and attitudes that will go against the government. They do not want healthy Americans to own guns. You can convince yourself otherwise, but that's, from a guy that was inside with law enforcement for 17 years for some of these things. I really do. I believe that the mental health issue is so they can kind of sneak in ADHD, mental health, red flag, because it's a hard argument when you say on the media, well, why would we let somebody with a mental health issue have a firearm? Nobody's going to say, well, we should. But then when we red flag a mental health issue as depression, right? How many of us go through a battle of depression in our lifetime, whether you go through a divorce or you lose a child or there's an event in your life that causes a battle of depression? That doesn't mean you're mentally unstable or that you're unfit to own a gun or have your Second Amendment rights violated, right? But there's definitely, I think that's where they go with it. I think that's why they propel mental health. I think that's why they have those issues, is so they can sneak you in on the backside and say, this guy came to the doctor. He asked for, some medication. Check him as a mental health expert. There is a mental health issue. You go back to, Sportsman's Warehouse to buy your firearm, do your FBI check, and they flag you and say you can't have a gun. That's where I think it's headed, and that's what I think they're doing. And that's why you never give up ground, whether you're a gun owner, whether you believe in it or not. You don't give up ground on freedom. You don't give the government rights. Anytime you give the government, big government, you're just giving up your own safety and security for a false sense of safety and security. And we have to be self-reliant. Mike, to get to your question as to what do we do, you take action, you rely on yourself, you train yourself, and you mentally prepare for the fight. Because there is, like Hamody said, there's going to be more attacks. It's guaranteed. We're soft in this country. We're not used to, the worst thing half these people ever seen is a fist fight at Walmart. And, you're like, oh my God, the lady puts the shopping cart into me and it's a big deal and we call 911 and it's ridiculous, right? In other countries, we're talking about car bombings, suicide bombings, stabbings, shootings, death daily. This world is an evil place. There's evil people that live within it. You need guys that will stand in that gap, so to speak, to protect you, but you can't rely on those men and women. You cannot rely on the government. Don't ever let them convince you otherwise. Train yourself, prepare yourself, find guys like us that are in this group, educate yourself, train yourselves with us. There's good people out there doing great things. Find them, vet them, spend the $200 on a class with them, spend the $500 on a gun, own your rights, do things that are there, and step up to the plate.
Man, what church do you go to? Because I feel like that's the church I want to go to, just because it's the safest church in America.
It's probably a church of himself and his firewood in Wyoming there.
Their whole police, their whole protective anti-terrorist trainings, just
you have
hire him to stand at the door.
You have to be over 250 pounds to be not qualified.
He's like, first of all, we need everybody in here that is big as fuck. And then everybody's like, oh, Lord.
Mass Eric Tansey.
Oh, gosh. Yes, man, thank you guys.
It's the first all transgender church in America. It's Tansey's jam.
Yeah, it's like, as long as you put me and that big dude out front, they'll be like, man, this church is all inclusive. They got protection and transvestites.
Actually,
I'm all in.
Actually, this is what I'm going to start referring to Al-Qaeda as the Tanseys.
The Tanseys.
I don't get shadow banned.
Yeah, we can just call them the Tansey. Man, it's been a pleasure to have all of you guys on.
What do you want to add as a final word, Mike, on your end at the end of this conversation? Anything?
Yeah, man. No, I'm just piggybacking on Butch, man. I think we're not advocating vigilantism.
Yeah, because he's not going to piggyback off of you. That's for sure. You imagine
how many size jokes
that dude jumping on your back? No, of course you're going to piggyback on him. Continue.
I call Big Spoon.
Yeah. No, but not advocating vigilantism, but just putting government back in its proper place, I think, and not expecting them to be the resolution and the solution for your family, for your church community, school. That's where we're getting at. To me, I think, and it's always been that way. We've just become so comfortable that we've outsourced our safety, and we've got to get beyond that because the problems aren't going to go away. The police are there and they have serve a certain role, but at the end of the day, I'm responsible for my family's safety and my church community, and it goes on from there. So,
how much do you think Joel Osteen pays for securing his church? Is he have bodyguards? And do you guys train those bodyguards?
We do not have any affiliation with that.
With Joel
I wouldn't mind Al-Qaeda if they attack him.
Hey, I think it's something. I think everybody
kidding.
can agree.
Yeah,
we need to soften Joel Osteen's place up a little bit.
I mean, he could totally take some money out of his own pocket and give it to. I bet he has volunteers and not paid, not paid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's probably exactly how he runs it.
That's a
guys, man. Failure to Stop podcast. Thank you so much. Listen, I'm being dead serious. If you anywhere you are in this country, if you want to learn both knowledge, tactics, training opportunities, hit up Guardian Response. Let's put up everybody's ats again on the screen. Hit up Guardian Response where you can find them. That's their Instagram handle. What's y'all's website?
Yeah, it's guardianresponse.us.
Guardianresponse.us. I'm telling you guys, if you are a part of your place of worship, if you hear this and you're like you're part of that team or that mentality, hit these guys up and find out how you can leverage their services to make your target harder. And we all want to be the hardest. We want to be as hard as possible. Not
stay cool while staying hard.
And Terrorist Whisperer, Hamody, his ad is there. Go follow him. Check and see if you've been unfollowed by Instagram of him, and then refollow him if that's the case, or add him to the repertoire of people you're listening to. If you see the word Cousins or Tansey, make sure you pay extra special attention. And he's got a book. There's a book out, and so where can they find more about you? The book, any videos you're a part of, that kind of thing.
The book, you can find it on my website, or you can reach to me personally if you want a hardcover on my social media or theterroristwhisper.com. The documentary is on Amazon Prime. You can watch it as the first military intelligence documentary to be released to the public. featuring the CIA director and many other intelligence officers that I worked under over the years in Iraq. And whether an Amazon Prime for the movie or the book, reaching to me personally, or the website, theterroristwhisper.com. And and I might change my book name and call it The Tansey's Whispers instead of The Terrorist Whispers.
the re-release, the updated version, the edited.
Or call it The War with My Cousin.
I just think it sucks. One thing before we go, it's somebody in the comment was sharpshooting me on my vernacular and how I pronounce things. And somebody said, oh, well, it's because he's from North Carolina. Have you guys listened to the Terrorist Whisperer talk? Because that's not great English. And none of you guys are calling him out. So let's be fair here, because actually your English is very good for being born in Iraq. And I got to go to Hamody's Christmas party. It was the most patriotic American Iraqi Christmas party I've ever been to. Lots of Christmas lights, more Christmas lights than anybody in his neighborhood.
I won #1 in the neighborhood.
Did you? And that's a really nice neighborhood on a golf course.
You can't have Christmas lights. You can't commandeer our holiday.
I know, bro. It's kind of weird when you're the Muslim guy, the only Muslim guy in your neighborhood, and you win the best Christmas lights.
And had the best Christmas party. It was fantastic to be there. Thank you guys so much, all of you, for being on our show. And,
what a great show.
What a fun time.
I don't know, Tansey, I'm ready to declare this my favorite show we've ever done. I love it, man.
Yeah, I'm all in on that, man.
We just need you guys every week. We need 3 more hosts. So let's talk to the network about that.
We just need some more terrorist attacks and hostage situations. And
God forbid.
Yeah, let's capitalize on all that negativity, you know? Never waste a good tragedy, according to Aunt Hillary.
More Tansey's attacks.
All right, everybody, thanks so much for listening. Go
ISIS
comment, follow.
ISIS is going to denounce Tansey tonight. They're going to be like, please don't call us Tansey.
We do not take responsibility for this, Tansey.
We're better than that. Oh, I just did an Iraqi accent. How was that?
Yeah.
It was terrible.
Did you guys think I was from Iraq?
For a minute.
All right, well, I'm going to take Hamody out for some ribs and some barbecue. So.
Man, what's so... Yeah, we're gonna. I was gonna say something that would have definitely got us banned.
He invited his Muslim friend to pork ribs barbecue.
I did.
You can't come. I guess I won't be taking you out then, man. Save myself a little bit of money.
He's definitely not qualified to be the Minister of Foreign Affairs. So
pigs.
I took him to the restaurant and I told him that they had the best ribs. It was a really fancy restaurant, and the waiter. He looks at me like right in front of the waiter and he goes, Eric, I cannot eat the ribs. I'm Muslim. And I was like, that sounds like a real radical thing to say. That sounds like a real radicalist. You sound like a real radicalist right now.
White supremacist.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you need some
that's all a joke,
therapy,
by the way.
Man,
that didn't
something.
happen.
I don't know. You need to be some re-education around here.
It's mental health.
All right, enough smoking and joking, guys. We love you all. Thank you for the Wolfpack and share this show up, guys. This is the breakout moment right here. Let's do it. Let's grow. Joe Rogan, you suck. I mean, I love you. I'm coming for you. All right, Wolfpack, unite. Let's get out of here. Love you.
See you guys.